What is up, guys? For today's video, I'm going to be doing an inventory showcase slash budget inventory because it's only a $24 inventory total. And yeah, without further ado, let's get right to the video. Starting off with the pistols, I have a USPS Cayman right here, which is in field tested condition. It does look kind of beat up, but I think it's a cool USPS that you don't see a lot in game. And I personally really like it, and it's just kind of very unique because no one really uses this. Alright, the next pistols I have are the dualies, Cobalt Quartz. I don't really ever use the dualies, but if I do, I use them in style with these nice dualies that are actually really good and very cheap. My next pistol is the CZ Auto Tigress. I don't use the Tech 9 or the 5.7, and I think the Tigress is a nice looking skin. Coming in at field tested condition. There are a few scratches, but they're pretty hard to see, and I think it's an overall good-looking skin. Up next is my P250 Dragon Lore, quote quote. I think this is just a really fun, cool skin. It's a P250 Sand Dune with a bunch of stickers and a name tag. Yeah, I don't know. I think it actually made the Sand Dune look good. And lastly, for the pistols on CT side, I have the Deagle Conspiracy, which is actually in factory new condition, and it's cheaper than I thought, coming in at around $2 for a factory new Conspiracy. And overall, it's a really good, clean gun to use for your Deagle. Moving into the heavy weapons category, I am using the Nova Green Apple, which is in factory new condition. I actually got this in a drop recently, and I thought it was a pretty cool skin for around 40 cents. My next gun is the XM 1014 Quicksilver, which I think is a pretty cool looking XM, and you can get in a bunch of different patterns, one for your liking. This is the one I got. I didn't really look too much on the market for its like special patterns, but here it is. Next up is my Mag 7 Bulldozer, which is actually in field-tested condition despite it looking so beat up. The float value for this is actually like super close to it being well-worn. But I think it looks pretty cool with all the scratches and has a nice Navi sticker on there from when I bought it. And it's all around a pretty cool looking Mag 7. Next up is my M249. And it's the system lock, and you don't ever really use the M249 too much in comp and stuff, but it's just cool to have a skin for every gun. And so for the M249, I paid the cheap price for it, and I got the system lock in actually field tested condition, despite it looking pretty overall good with hardly any scratches. Next up, for the last gun for the heavy weapons category on CT side is the Negev Terrain. And I personally don't use the Negev that much, even though I am in silver. And I think it is overall a pretty nice looking skin for when you do use the Negev. It's a pretty cheap skin too. And yeah, I think it looks pretty good overall. Moving into the SMG category, I have the MP9 Ruby Poison Dart, which I think actually looks really nice. It's one of the cheaper MP9s, and it just looks pretty clean for the price. Next skin I have is the MP7 Urban Hazard, which I think is a pretty cheap, which is a pretty good cheap skin for the MP7. This one has quite a bit of scratches on it, but I don't really ever use the MP7 too much. But if I ever did use it, which I have a couple times, it's a pretty nice looking skin. Next up in the SMG category is the UMP Indigo, which I think is an overall pretty nice looking, very clean UMP. It's kind of plain, but I really just like the color. It's just really nice and clean, and it's a good UMP for you to use. Moving on to the next gun, I have the P90 Module. You always have to have a good P90 skin. I know the skin is kind of overused, but I think overall it's overused for a reason. It's because it's such a good looking skin. For my Bison, I have the Bison Blue Streak, which I think is an overall great looking Bison. For a pretty cheap price. I believe this one is in field-tested condition, and overall it looks really good just for those rare times when you're using the Bison. Moving on to the rifle category, the FAMAS I'm using is the Survivor Z. For the Survivor Z, one of the best parts about it is you don't have to get it in factory new condition or anything, because the skin looks beat up in pretty much any condition, and it's hard to tell the difference between something like factory new and well-worn, or even battle-scarred. And I think it's a very good looking FAMAS. I personally don't use the FAMAS too much. If I'm cash strapped, I'll usually buy an SMG or a shotgun, but when I do use the FAMAS, this is a good option. For my M4A4, I have the Evil Daimyo, which I think is a pretty nice looking skin. This one is in field tested condition, and you can see quite a few scratches around the clip. The clip is pretty beat up. But besides that, it is a pretty good looking skin. A bunch of scratches you don't see unless you're shooting. Unless you're inspecting it or you're reloading. But besides that, I think it's a very good looking skin for the price. For my SSGO8, also known as a Scout, I have the Detour, which I think is one of the best looking Scouts in the game. I think this one is probably the best, just behind the Blood in the Water. This is minimal wear, believe it or not. There are quite a few scratches, but it still looks pretty good overall when you're just holding it normally. And I think it's a great Scout for the price. Moving on to the AUG. I don't use this gun very much, but actually I don't know if I've ever used this in a comp game. But this is just a very good clean skin for just when those once in a lifetime occasions when I do use it, and I think it's a good looking skin. Could get it in a better condition than what I have, though. It does look pretty beat up. But an overall pretty nice AUG skin. For my AWP, I have the AWP red line. I just put the face sticker on the scope because I think it goes with the red line, and then I put an IVET sticker on the back of the gun. It's kind of a hidden sticker, you can't see it unless you're inspecting it. And this red line is in field tested condition. I think this AWP is a very clean AWP for the price, and it's definitely one of the better ones that there are. I love this AWP, and I've had it for a while, and yeah, it's a good AWP. As for almost every budget loadout I've seen, for the Scar 20, I have the Grotto. This skin is in almost any budget loadout video that you will ever see. And, it's a clean looking skin, and it's really good for the price. Plus, you probably aren't going to be using the Scar 20 too much, so it's just a good looking skin. Moving on to my T side of the loadout, which is just a couple extra guns. Starting out with the Glock Grinder, which I think is just a good starting Glock. It's a pretty cheap skin at around 50 cents. And you can get some really cool patterns on this gun. I just got a pretty average one, but I think this is a very nice, clean-looking Glock for you to use. And for anyone to use, and it's pretty cheap. It's a lot cheaper than something, say, like a Water Elemental if you're really on a budget. And it looks very clean. The next part of the T side of the loadout is the sawed-off Bamboo Shadow, which looks very clean. And it is a skin you won't see very much considering no one really uses the sawed-off. But I really love the skin. I got it for a drop, and I've always really liked the Bamboo Shadow stuff, and I think it looks great. For my Mac 10 in the T-side loadout, I am using the Lapis Gator, which I think is a very nice and clean skin. I end up using the Mac 10 quite a bit. And it's just, the Lapis Gator is a very clean, cheap skin for you to use. For my T side, I actually have a different UMP, just because I unboxed this one. And this is actually the UMP Labyrinth. You can get many different combinations for, like, different patterns on it and stuff like that. And it's a pretty clean looking UMP. I go between using this and the Indigo a lot, that's kind of why I have it split. And I think it's a nice looking UMP for the price. For my Galil, I have the Galil Rocket Pop. This is a very beat up looking field tested one. I never use the Galil, like I said, for my CT side. I pretty much, if I'm going to use I'm either going to buy an AK, or if I'm cash strapped, I'll move to a shotgun or an SMG. Sometimes it can be good for maps like Dust 2 and longer range stuff like that. But overall, I don't use it too much, and it still looks pretty good, besides it having so many scratches. It's not too much more expensive for, say, like a minimal wear one, but it looks pretty good no matter what. For my AK-47, I'm using the Cartel, which I think is a very nice, clean-looking skin. I've gone between using the Cartel and the blue laminate recently, and I think I've ended up liking the Cartel a bit more. It's kind of an interesting skin. You don't see it too much in comp. You see a couple people using it here and there, but it's not like a super common skin like, say, the red line or something like that. And I think it looks really good, especially when you have high shaders on it and it shines in the light with that, like, silver color. And it's a great looking AK, I think, for the price. Moving on to the SG553, I am using the Fallout Warning, which I think is actually a very nice looking skin, despite it being pretty beat up. I don't know, there's just something I really like about the skin. It's a pretty cheap skin, and for those rare times when you do use this gun, which it's actually not a bad gun, I think it's kind of hated on a bit too much. This is actually a pretty good skin for you to use. And lastly, for my Terrorist Auto, I am using the Orange Kimono. I think this skin looks very nice, and you can try and get many different patterns for like where the stripes are. I just didn't look into it too much, and I got one that's on the scope, and I think it looks pretty nice. It just has a nice orange color, like for like your T side, and I think it looks great. Alright, well that's gonna do it all for today's video. Thank you guys for watching, and if you have any other ideas for videos, please leave them in the comments, and have a wonderful day.